Hello there, my name is Kuma, and today we are having a close look at Leto.
ソニアは昇進までどんだけかかったんだよ。自由行動させてくれよ。おい、冗談だろ。またチームワークの練習かよ。
Leto is a 5-star lord, a guard class well known for its range, very applicable to anyone who cares about positioning. But most important, Leto is the last member of the Ursus Student Council. That was not released back in Children of Ursus. That means she stayed in NPC jail for 3 years. We know from the lore that Leto goes out on missions together with the other bear girls, but they simply didn't allow us to have her. Fortunately, she's now playable and the squad is complete. Hypergriff even kept her original design. It might be a little bit hard to notice, but in the original arts from Children of Ursus, she already wielded her two makeshift weapons that we see now in the release art. Although it is a little bit weird to see Leto in her old school uniform, since we know this Leto we see today is a couple years older, 19 according to herself. But we shouldn't dwell on that, after all, we gotta see what this girl can do in gameplay. Leto is the fully fledged version of a 5-star physical damage lord. Lapland could be used as a physical damage dealer before, but her S1 has always been considered subpar by many members of our community, and of course, having her S2 deal arts damage doesn't quite fit Lapland in this description. The same is true for Thorns, who always had his poison to deal arts damage, which will be getting a massive upgrade once his module releases, giving him the ability to stack his poison talent. The others who fit as physical damage lords are Silver Ash, Frostleaf, and Luz Alrei. So Leto's release really completes the collection. Now have access to them in the 3 rarities. Leto has lower base attack when compared to her 5-star peers, but she gets a bit more max HP, and this is mostly thanks to her trust bonus, giving her both stats instead of only attack as the other two. Leto's skills are very simple. Her first skill is a generic swift strike that we will mostly ignore today, and her S2 gives her an attack increase, she now targets 2 enemies, and it gets rid of the basic lore trait of dealing less damage to targets they are not blocking. Her talent is a faction buff. I will talk about it with more details later, but the important part for now is that she gives herself a SPD while her skills are active. Now let's jump into the battlefield and see what Leto is capable of with this simple kit. As you would expect from a lord, Leto works really well as a lane holder. Unfortunately, this term has been used to describe so many different things that I'd rather explain what I mean. Leto is really good at dealing with small enemies and your occasional elite, but she won't do so well against a lane of elites or as a boss killer. If you have a single lane, Leto will be the one keeping the trash away so your big hitters can focus on the big guys. After all, she has a decent ASPD and is capable of targeting 2 enemies at once half of the time. Those are nice traits for the job of trash cleaner. That is not to say that she won't help damage the big guys when they come around. Of course she will. Damage is damage. But if we're being fair, Leto's numbers are not equipped to deal with the beefier enemies, and in general, lords are not equipped to play alone. Of course, we all have seen what Thorns and Chubai can do, that's the power of 6-star numbers. But if you look closely, lords tend to have a support role in addition to their damage, contrary to what you would expect. Thorns and Midnight are the only exceptions.
見識を広げることも大事だね。
Leto has her faction buff, which we'll talk about in a moment. Ayers gives a SPD. It's a small but rare buff. Lapland can silence. Silver Ash reveals stealth and lowers redeploy time. Irene can deal with drones really well if you're struggling to fit in a sniper. Frostleaf slows, binds, and can even get the occasional freeze after her module releases. Zalrei can give some extra SP to his allies, and Chubai is really good at binding. So when we look at the 5-star lord numbers, you shouldn't find it weird that they look kinda low. If you look closely, they are actually quite consistent. their DPS doesn't increase that much during their skill time when comparing to the DPS they have around the whole skill cycle, on skill plus off skill, which is to be expected. Leto and Lapland don't have that big of an attack increase, and although Ayers does have a much bigger buff, he has a much longer downtime. All on top of those 3 being able to target 2 enemies during their skills. Of course, during these number comparisons I always consider a single target and no defenses. I can show you a defense and res graph if you want to see it so much. The reason why I usually don't go through this process is simply because it becomes easy to infer these results, if you care enough that is, simply by looking at the damage per hit in the basic comparison. What I mean is that I would tell you the conclusion to this graph, when it comes to Leto at least, since this is her review, even if I didn't make the graph, because the enemies around the whole game follow a repeating pattern when it comes to their base stats. So let's get to this conclusion. Leto will perform fairly well against anything up to normal defenders, enemies up to 800 defense that you will find in basically every event. And of course, she will deal a lot of damage to those elites who don't have a lot of defense, but are still big threats. Unfortunately, she won't have enough damage in her hits to get past the same defenders in their elite versions, because they usually go up to 1000 defense or so. She will still be breaking through their defense, but the total damage won't be high enough to completely kill those enemies in one skill cycle. The same is true for any of the special enemies you find from time to time with higher defense than that. When we talk about bosses, the same idea still applies, but now we need to remember that their HP pool is much bigger, and it would be unwise to expect an operator with single target damage potentials that cap at 37,000 to be soloing bosses. Unless you're talking about Big Bob, because as we all know, he's just a defender cosplaying as a boss. Leto can still deal respectable damage to bosses with low defense. For example, she can activate one of the Dominion Clouds for Emperor's Blade. But if you really insist in playing with Leto in boss fights, she will do best when paired with her bear friends, Istina and Rosa. Leto's faction buff gives a SPD not only to herself while her skill is active, but also to the other members of the Student Council, being Zima, Istina, Gumo, and Rosa. Sadly, Absinthe never became an official member of the club, so she's left out of this. With this extra SPD, obviously the damage and DPS of everyone will increase, but more notably, Istina will be able to get full slow up time during her skill 2, which is impressive. And I will now bring up Leto's skill 1, because believe it or not, this generic skill does have an application when considering the faction. This skill has a longer duration, which might come in handy depending on the squad layout and the enemies you're facing. Of course, giving Rosa a SPD for longer will result in a lot more damage and many more dead enemies. There is one last detail to her faction buff though. Leto's talent also makes the other members of the Student Council activate their skills when Leto activates her own, as long as they have the SP ready, that is. This is a very flavorful effect. You know how much I love flavor in the design of my operators? And you have no idea of how wide is the smile on my face when everyone activates their skills with a single click. I should say that it has been brought to my attention that many view this as a drawback and nothing more. And since this is a review, I will have to say, that is correct. But also, I haven't found a single situation yet where this has become a nuisance. I will take this drawback as a positive, just on the basis of how happy it makes me. But your mileage may vary depending on how aware you want to be when playing the game. And of course, feel free to tell me what you think of this effect in the comments. Just keep your decorum, of course. That being said, there is another thing we haven't looked at just yet. Buffs. Usually when we look at buffs, we come out with a happy conclusion, a way to make your operator deal loads more damage. But Leto, like most of the lords, doesn't have a damage multiplier in their skills. she instead has an attack increase, which wouldn't be a big deal if her stats weren't in the range that they are. In case you didn't know, Arknights sums all the attack increases and then proceeds to multiply the result by all the damage modifiers. That's how power strikes get so strong when you play IS. Because power strikes are damage multipliers, they will multiply all the attack increases you found during your run. Spinach increases attack, class books increase attack, meta upgrades in IS increase attack. And then the skill comes at the end saying, and now double it. Since Leto doesn't have a damage modifier, the attack increases you can get from buffs won't be as effective. It will still be good, don't get me wrong, but it won't be the best you can do with those buffs. Your best bet will be to use attack buffs with longer duration, like our beloved bards Sora and Skadi, or some of the percentage attack increases that also last for a long time, like Palas, Virtuosa, or Swire. By the way, did you know Swire's buff is stronger than Virtuosa's? I know, right? Really unexpected. But you should keep in mind that she won't be exploding walls the same way some other operators would with the same buff. The last thing you should know is that Leta can use Rosa's faction buff too. That means if they are together, Leta will have plus 10% attack from the get-go. Just a small detail to remember, because with this, she will have the highest attack between the 5-star lords. And that's that. Give me a like if you enjoyed the review and tell me your thoughts about Leta in the comments. I am very happy to finally have the bear girl that was kept away from me, and I hope you will enjoy having her around as well. Anyway, I hope everyone has a very nice day. Peace out.